I also would like to just have you do something that I hope is not too taxing at all. But it's one of those things we've been talking about, the minor prophets and all of that. I want to make sure that we can say the books of the Bible together. We aren't going to start in Genesis and go all the way through, but let's just, would you quote with me the books of the Bible? We'll start with Ezekiel. Are you ready? Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah. Oh, wait. What did you say? It's a setup, I know. I told Jeremy, I said, I want to switch topics, not because I don't like this book. There's too much pronunciation pressure he's placed on me. Advertising, we're going to find the right way to say that. But that word, I grew up in a church that taught the books of the Bible, and dear Miss Moses and Mrs. Williams in my third grade class, I learned that word as Habakkuk. And I've been saying that for years. And then I realized that, there's different ways to say it, and we're still talking about that book. And so is it Habakkuk or some variation of that? I heard some little kid call it hockey puck. That was, I knew that one would be not needed, but and then we did walk through the Bible seminars in our church, and we've done them here, in fact, and that's a wonderful thing. But they've got this wonderful keyword learning system, and then I realized that not only is this visualized for every book of the Bible, but then I thought, okay, they're going to tip their hand on how they pronounce that too. What do you see in this image that's there? You see the big ha on the back, and there may be an intentionality on that I'll talk about as we unpack the book. But that gentleman is wearing a backpack. Well, that's not close to how the book is even spelled, but you get the idea there. And of course, that individual is looking out a ways, and he is looking for an answer from the Lord. But where is he positioned? On the tower. What kind of tower is that? A watchtower. See, that's the clever angle that Walk Through the Bible has done, is they try to create images, odd images, to help you understand what this is all about. And if you wanted my just kind of a short 3-word summary of what the book of Habakkuk, we'll skip that one too. I'd put it this way: it's singing in the pain. And I'm already apologizing to those who love Gene Kelly's Singing in the Rain. I've got a grandson that absolutely loves that song. I didn't know all the words. I knew part of it. I just haven't been into that. But listen to this. I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling. I'm happy again. I'm laughing at the clouds. So dark up above. The sun's in my heart, and I'm ready for love. Let the stormy clouds chase every one from this place. Come on with the rain. I have a smile on my face. I walk down the lane with a happy refrain, just singing in the rain. I think, what's wrong with Gene Kelly? That kind of mindset's all wet. No, never mind. That's a bad pun. We won't go any further than that. But the point is, he's saying it doesn't matter what's going on in the circumstances. It's not going to change his perspective at all. Mark Dever put a intro into his sermon on this. Now, I never heard the sermon, but I saw it in the book, a collection of them, as he's reviewing the entire Old Testament. It's a great little resource. And in this section, he starts off with saying, well, how can I be happy when? And then you can fill in the blank with all kinds of things. And if you took a poll of people that you know, or you just wound up talking to family members and saying, what do you think about our country right now? Where do you think we are headed? What concerns you about this? And you might hear a huge list of things. And it doesn't matter whether you're on one end of the extreme or the other for the political spectrum. You see things culturally, and it's the same kind of thing. I don't know. It doesn't make me happy. For some, seeing social injustice, it is what trips their trigger. If somebody sees a kind of a bent towards using fossil fuels instead of green energy, it somehow discourages them, thinks the rest of the world is out to destroy the very beautiful place that we know God's created for us. On the other side, we can say, what is going on? This makes no sense. In fact, that's what we gripe about. There's no common sense anywhere. You want to defund the police and then say, what are we going to do about crime? That makes no sense. Well, how can I be happy when that's going on? Blaise Pascal said this: happiness is the motive of every action of every man, even those who hang themselves. Oh, that's an odd phrase. A French mathematician and philosopher had that to say. He was saying, why is it that people would even commit suicide? They're looking for some kind of release, something to bring happiness to them. By the way, that guy also said this: happiness can be found neither in ourselves nor in external things, but in God and in ourselves as united with Him. That's getting closer to it. So we walk into this book, Habakkuk. I may flip back and forth because even YouTube pronunciations, I found 3 different recordings of the right way to pronounce this book. And they're different. But they're all saying that's the right way. And we aren't going to get hung up on that. Just understand, if I revert back and forth, I'm not trying to be politically correct. I just get confused. Okay? That's all it is. Habakkuk was given a preview of God's discipline of Judah, and I just think, what would it be like to be a spokesman for God, but then to be given a divine message that I'm supposed to deliver faithfully that involves the very demise of my people and my country? That's what we're in for. The historical setting. We've got a framework that's been laid out a little bit here. But in a very quick succession, I would say Judah's last 4 kings were men who really did not stay the course. Well, Josiah was gone. Good King Josiah was gone, and his sons did not follow the pattern that he had set, and then we find things really deteriorating, and then it unfolds further from that, and we're stepping into this. What was going on here? Eventually, we find Josiah's grandson, Jehoiakim, exiled by Nebuchadnezzar, and that's 597. So we're jumping a little earlier than what we just heard about from Malachi, a little later in the progression of time. Well, Habakkuk lived during the time of Jeremiah and Daniel and Ezekiel, and he spoke about those things, but we know absolutely nothing about this prophet. We do not know the town of his birth. We don't know the date. We don't know his parents. We English-speaking people don't even know how to pronounce his name. So we're kind of jumping in just with this little book that has 3 chapters in it, and it's 56 verses. That's it. But he was an unconventional prophet because all the prophets, they're told by God, here's the message I want you to take to the people. You're going to speak it on my behalf. And we read this, and what do we find? Whoop, a little reverse. I hope you're in that book, because I want you to follow along with me. I won't have the time to read every verse, even though there's only 56. Put it this way. I would have time if I didn't talk about it. And maybe we ought to learn from Jeremy's efforts at directing our prayer by reading the book of Philippians this morning. But Habakkuk brings his questions to God, and he knows that there is going to be a response there, and that meaning of his name means embrace. Now, if we could just call him the embracer, we'd all know how to say that word, but I don't know that that's really all that significant unless we tie it to his response in chapter 3, where we find him saying, oh, here's what I do know. I break into this psalm, a song perhaps. This short book has some familiar words to it. Chapter 2, verse 4, the righteous shall live by his faith. That's quoted several times in the New Testament. Romans and Galatians, Hebrews. A common one, I've heard this before, chapter 2, verse 20. But the Lord is in his holy temple, let all the earth keep silent before him. That's a classic one. The very end of the book, if you use the King James verse, he makes my feet like hinds feet on high places, and there's even a book by that title. You have to go to another translation to say, well, he's going to make my feet like the deer, so that I can get up on the higher elevations and so forth. That's familiar. Even Steve Schultz, when he was talking about this conference and the fact that he would miss it, he said one of his favorite sections is those concluding verses that he and Joe have talked about. Though the fig tree should blossom and fruit not be on the vines, nor there be fruit on the vines. And it ends with, yet I will rejoice in the Lord, I will take joy in the God of my salvation. There's a similarity between the content of this and the experiences that Job had. They're talking about what is it that goes on. Why is there this evil that is so prevalent? It's not just that it plagues all of us. You will see some reasons why I think we ought to make it a priority to know what's in this book. A Greek philosopher, Epicurus, lived about 300 BC, and he had this criticism of what was given to him about this God that the Christians talked about. His formulation was this: if the Christian God, who is omniscient and omnipotent and omnibenevolent, exists, then evil does not exist. His rationale: if God were all-knowing, he'd know all about evil, as well as how to stop it. If he were all-powerful, he could stop it. And if he were all-loving, he would desire to stop evil. But, he observed, evil persists. Therefore, there is either no God, or it's not the God that the Christians claim. That's why I said Habakkuk is struggling here with what he knows to be true. And we're going to hang our thoughts very easily on 3 hooks. The first chapter is going to be this thing about questioning and complaining. That's where we're going. That chapter 2, that's where we're going to have him listening and thinking. And by the time we get to chapter 3, that's where the praying and the singing comes in. Look at here, you're going to see that this word, it says the oracle that Habakkuk the prophet saw, uh, the word massa. It's something to be carried or lifted up. And so that idea of it being a burden was something that comes right in the very term. And he's distressed. He is really distressed about things. What is it? Hey, he's looking around. Just let your eyes scan over verses 2, 3, and 4, and you're going to see, I'm calling for help. But where are you, Lord? I look around, there's violence everywhere. The evil around me is absolutely miserable. Everywhere I look, I see it. I'm surrounded by people who love to argue and to fight. The law has been paralyzed. There's no justice. The court systems are messed up. Is he talking about some foreign invading group? No, he's crying out because this is his beloved country. It is the people of God. The people of God. And he's describing his discouragement, and he said the wicked outnumber the righteous here. He's working his way through that, and you get to verse 5, and then you see this declaration that comes in. Yeah, he's distressed about it. He's got the question. But what is the declaration that God makes? He says, well, let's look. Look among the nations and see, wonder and be astounded. For I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told. The gripe was, Lord, how come I'm calling to you, but I don't see you moving in any way? And he says, hang on. Let me tell you what's happening. You are not going to believe it, even though I'm the one telling you this. I'm going to raise up the Chaldeans to run right through Judah. So let me tell you about them. And he starts unpacking what that is like. You can let your eyes drift through there, and you see that the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, that gives us a clue to when this was written. It was before the events of Daniel transpired. It was before Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego were placed in the fiery furnace. All that happened. This was told beforehand. All that happened after these words were given. And then we find that this isn't it. Because he was distressed, but after giving this information, he has this other reaction to it. And now he comes in with the complaint saying, how can you do such a thing? We look at there, and he starts off with this, are you not from everlasting, O Lord my God? This is verse 12, my Holy One. We shall not die. God's telling him the Babylonians are coming through. And no, your eyes are too pure to even look at that kind of evil. And you know what? We've got our problems here in Judea, but the people of Judah really, they're missing the mark. But boy, oh boy, not like the Babylonians. You know what's going to happen. They're going to wind up engaging in all kinds of idolatrous things, and they will never even acknowledge that their success is coming from your hand or for your purpose. You can't do this. Your eyes are too pure to allow such a thing. So that's kind of where we are in the front chapter of this. Why? Why would God give us a book with the death of Habakkuk's community as the basic plot? Why is this in here? If God put this message in here. Now, we know the bigger picture, that there's this relapse and repentance and relapse and repentance. You see the cycle coming through. But this particular one, how would you answer that? I've been mulling that over, and then it suddenly dawned on me. Okay, we aren't going to exchange Judah in America. That's not good hermeneutics to do that. But can you understand what he was feeling when he looks around in his culture and he sees things just spinning into the tank, man? This is not good. Do you know of anyone who may experience the loss of a good way of life? Have you noticed we don't have the same freedoms we once did? That's here in our culture. Oh, we still, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else but America for those things. Have you known anybody that's got this little cultural displacement or were canceled, that they've lost their livelihood or security? As somebody that was physically displaced from their homes? And I don't even have to go in the political realm for that. Just think about the people that experienced the Hurricane Ian. Do you know any people that are facing some difficult things like that? God gave this message for the purpose of preparing for such a catastrophe. And you watch the prophet react to this. And it's rather fascinating to me. I'm not going to take credit for this. I'm using a commentary by James Bruckner, but the NIV application commentary. But you know those common signs of grief? They talk about people working through things when they get a very severe prognosis from a doctor, and they isolation, and then anger, and denial, and bargaining, and then depression, and then finally acceptance. Now that commentator went through here and he said, you know what? You can almost identify this in Habakkuk's life, the way he writes. He's angry at the front end. You will not hear. You will not even save. How long am I going to cry out for help and you're going to remain silent? I'm telling you, it's violent here, and you aren't saving. You see that attitude, and then you see this, well, I feel isolated because I'm calling and no one's there, and the anger comes in and says that justice never prevails. It's perverted. It's twisted. I'm upset about such a thing. And then the denial. Oh, my Holy One, verse 12, we shall not die. Can you imagine? Oh Lord, no, not our people group. We are not going to bear the consequence of this. This is God's prophet. And he's, no, Lord, not so. He works his way through that. He's unable to even figure out what is working through here. He starts negotiating with God. But God, your eyes are too pure. That bargaining thing. So let me just appeal to you based on what I know about you. No, you can't. You can't be serious about this. And then he moves to the depression. We didn't really read this, but you saw it there in verses 14 and 15. You make us like that fish of the sea, crawling things that have no rulers. He brings up all of them with a hook, drags them out with his net. We're just, there's no hope. Wicked men are going to pull us up with the hooks. But where does he get to the acceptance? We'll find out. It shows up, but not till the Lord speaks in chapter 2. Then we see him responding very, very differently in chapter 3. Well, if this is the dialogue where we've got the questioning and complaining, then the second chapter is the revelation that comes in. This is where the prophet just decides he's got to listen. So he puts all this out there and he's describing, Lord, you got to know this is the reason behind my complaint. And then what does it say there? I will take my stand at my watch post and station myself on the tower and look out to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. All right, I've said my piece. I've asked for a response. I am just going to wait and see. And God does. He knows what will happen, that God will answer. Verse 2, and the Lord answered me. Write the vision, make it plain on the tablet so he may run who reads it. And as you look at this, you're going to see that he waited, but then the Lord answers, but it's not just an answer. He gives him some instruction along the way. Do you see that there? I want you to write this plainly on the tablet so that the message can get where it needs to go accurately, securely. And then he says, by the way, don't miss it. This is a future thing. For still the vision awaits its appointed time, verse 3. And if, by chance, it seems to be slow in unfolding, wait patiently. It will come. It will surely come. It will not delay. And then we find that in this message that God is giving, and he wants it recorded accurately, he starts talking about the dilemma here, and he uses a series of woes. That word, hoi, that's where I wondered if the walk through the Bible, ha on there, was an attempt to capture even that Hebrew word. And that's used all kinds of times in the Old Testament. And in the Old Testament, it's used a variety of ways, at least 3 different ways that I found. One of them is that it's used to describe funeral laments, the loss that they feel. And it's translated there, alas. It's used to gain attention and get people to respond, translated ho or ah. And 41 times out of those 53, it's used by prophets to announce doom. Woe to someone. That's what we find here. So the wicked were under the judgment of God. They were facing a time of ruin and mourning. And if an unrepentant people did not turn back, then that's why they were going to mourn the destruction of their lives. So these phrases that come in are not original with me. They came out of the book of the 12, the message of the 12. And but so I want to give credit where that's due. But I did like the summary statements in these things, because in this first one, the first few verses here, the last part of verse 6, you'll see, woe to him who heaps up what is not his own. For how long? And loads himself with pledges. He's spoiling people. He's taking things that don't belong. It wasn't his. He's extorting resources that way. Woe to that individual. And what is he referring to? Is it to Judah? No. He's talking now about the Babylonians. You're concerned that I'm using an evil country to correct you as a nation, but don't misunderstand. I'm really concerned about evil at any time. The injustices that are there all the time. Bill reminded us that God does not change. And that's something that brings security. We know what makes him upset. And here he's saying, all right, Habakkuk, you're thinking about this, but let me show you what awaits these individuals. And the second one in the next group of verses, him that dishonestly makes wealth, verses 9 through 11. Woe to him who gets evil gain for his house, to set his nest on high, to be safe from the reach of harm. You've devised shame for your house by cutting off many peoples. The stone will cry out from the wall, and the beam from the woodwork and respond. The ones that are in that spot, they're going to be judged as well. There's a couple more in here. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed. Woe to him, verse 12, who builds a town with blood and founds a city on iniquity. Hey, think, how do you build a city on bloodshed? Well, you can move people out for sure, but you can abuse slaves until they get crushed by their own efforts at being driven to that and being treated as a disposable economy, just a resource to be used. It can be taking things away from individuals. It's that kind of thing. No, Babylonians took that to a high level. And so he's saying, that's not going to be off the radar of God at all. And then he says, then there's this whole idea of just self-indulgence. Why is it wrong? Why was it condemned in that next group of verses? Woe to him who gets his neighbor drunk, because of what he would do to the people that were drunk. I mean, he's talking about crude, vulgar stuff there. You give your neighbor drink, get him drunk, and then he doesn't have the ability to respond correctly, and you can all do all kinds of things to them. Male or female, it doesn't matter. You're there to just get for yourself. Don't miss that. The cup is in the Lord's right hand, it says halfway through verse 16. And he said there will be judgment for that. What's that last woe? Woe to him who crafts idols and then says to wooden things, wake up. I love the section. What profit, verse 18, is an idol when its maker has shaped it? A metal image, a teacher of lies. For its maker trusts in his own creation when he makes speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a wooden thing, awake, and to a silent stone, arise. Can this thing teach? No. No, because it's overladen with gold and silver, and there's no breath in it. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silent before him. And that's a great verse. You could build a great worship service out of that. But think about this. All the efforts that are there, there's going to be a day when all the earth will recognize those idols never were the ones that did anything. You put your hope in something that is not capable of even answering that. You see the carryover. We've talked about that. We've got our own versions of idol worship. That's a fascinating element. Then that final chapter, let's keep moving right along. The silence gives way to a psalm. And this is where we find the praying and the singing. I'm using this because it's got all the marks of a psalm, and yet the verse 1 says it's a prayer of Habakkuk the prophet. And what is it that he zeroes in on this? It's almost like a doxology to everything he's learned. He's got that. But what's changed in this? I mean, he's coming back now and he's saying, oh man, well, I've heard the report of you and your work. Oh Lord, I do fear. In the midst of the years, revive it. In the midst of the years, make it known. What's he appealing to? He said, I know what's happened in the past. I've heard the reports. It predates my life, but I know. Would you revive that kind of working in the people again? Would you make it known again? And then he talks about the splendor that's there. But don't miss that in your wrath, Lord, remember mercy. It's like there's this, I know Yahweh is serious about injustice. He's serious about evil. But in your wrath, remember mercy. That's who he is. And then he starts reviewing in those verses. We won't take time to review all of them. But this song here is not just for the prophet. This is one for all of God's followers. It's interesting to me that 1947, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, and amongst that collection, Habakkuk 2 and 3 were in there. And you realize that's significant. That for generations, what is it? Oh, the just shall live by his faith. The righteous shall live by his faith. Oh, what is it? Because chapters 2 and 3, they've got a lot in it. It would have had in verse 14, the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of God, the Lord, as water covers the sea. Those very fragments were used, to encourage. It was part of the people of God. They were reviewing this exact same book that we are today. They were reminded of the fact that we should keep silent before him. The psalm here is looking at Yahweh in all of his splendor, God's awe, his mercy. He really outlines the past experiences and then adds to that what he's just learned about the future planned actions, what God has said, this is what's going to happen to Babylon. And you look at it happened in a very short amount of time. But what did that do? The combination of those two things happened. He's outlining it here in his praise and his worship of God. And that brings us to that ending point. What is it? Verse 16, I hear and my body trembles, my lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones, my legs tremble beneath me. I don't want to see this. I don't have a death wish for my country, for the people that I'm a part of. Yet I will wait quietly for the day of trouble to come upon the people who invade us. What's that mean? I do like the way the New King James or the King James Version translates, that I might rest in the day of trouble. Waiting quietly for it to arrive or resting in the day of trouble. There's a slight difference there. Do you catch it? Because when we have that perspective, then the next verse makes great sense. And so, though the fig tree should not blossom, and though the fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no fruit, the flocks be cut off from the fold, and there is no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice. What is it that's represented to that ancient culture by those very items? It's food. You want to talk about a supply chain interruption? That's what he's talking about. And so it doesn't matter whether you can't get what you want to eat. When the fields don't produce, and when the very animals that you depend on for livelihood for you and your families, when all of that's gone, how are you going to survive? And he's saying, though all that happens, yet I will trust, I will rejoice in the Lord. It's not just a simple, quiet trust. No, I'm going to sing. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places. Now, what a wonderful thing. Well, we tried to cover some of this. There's no way you're going to catch all the detail in this image. Jeremy mentioned last night the Bible Project, and this is the summary view of it. And I've got copies of this. If you want a way to review, you can go find this yourself, but some of you might be a bit intimidated at trying to find things that are out there that you haven't visited or someone shows you where they are. But there are some copies of this on the table. I don't know that everybody will take one, because if you're familiar with the Bible Project, you can go listen to the 6-minute overview of it, and it'll walk you through some of the same things that we did here. But I want us to just slow down for these last couple of minutes that we have together and say, so what? What do we do with this storyline? I mean, what is the value of it? And I there's so many. I reworked this a couple of different times, and I don't think I'm still ready with all of it. But one of these practical things is be careful not to take a few correct facts and draw a faulty conclusion. Do you know that's what Habakkuk did? I mean, are God's eyes so pure that he cannot tolerate evil? Sure. He knew God was fully capable of stopping evil, of intervening, but he drew a conclusion that wasn't right. He said, you don't care. Well, I mean, why is it that you haven't responded according to my timetable? He had some of those things there, but he was jumping a little bit. Now, the flip side of that is I love the fact that he brought those real questions to God in prayer. And what did he fuel his prayers with? His knowledge of the Word. He knew the Old Testament prophets, the other ones. He knew the history of Israel, that as well. He knew the Scriptures. And so the ability to bring the question, I mean, it does remind me of Job. Job didn't understand, and God knows we don't understand. And so to bring the question isn't the problem. I still try to get my mind around the fact that even the Lord, when he was on the cross, said, "Why have you forsaken me?" He knew why. And yet in that moment of pain, it surfaced. Don't doubt God's view of injustice or his sovereignty. And see, when our very foundations get shaken, and I don't think we're there yet, people. I think that may come ahead for us. I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised if there will be more challenging times ahead for us. In the moment, don't ever doubt. When you look and see, how is it that some of our people in this world get away with no justice? I mean, they escape judgment. It's not fair. It's not right. It's not even according to our laws that are already there. And then you find some other person who is operating within some realm of normalcy, and they get the book thrown at them, and they get jailed, and it makes us ticked. I mean, I think about the sidewalk counselor that was talking to a individual, not about outside of an abortion clinic. And there was a dust up, and this guy was screaming profanities at this other man's child. And after it all got settled, that guy that was there as the sidewalk counselor is the one that was charged. And he didn't push it back on this, and he tried to cooperate. What am I saying? There's injustices all around. Big scale, small scale. You'll see it all over the place. Don't ever doubt God's view. It does color this. He's not blind to it. He will not be silent. There will be a day when that happens. Here's the other practical point. If God unfolds the world events and he's calling the shots, he uses an evil nation to spank his children, to punish them for their wrongdoing. Do you realize what that means? He can use anything he wants, and he's using everything he wants because he's sovereignly in control. So that's the big picture. But the other implication is that God is also sovereignly over control of the circumstances of every one of us. That brings us to the same spot that Habakkuk had to realize. Here's a practical thing. Habakkuk talked about supply chain problems in his life. When you're in these moments when you're thinking rightly, try paraphrasing, personalizing those verses 17 and 18 and 19 with your world and your circumstances, the things that are going on at this point in your life. What is it that could rattle you, that could shake you to your foundation? Is it your health that you're enjoying? Is it your family relationships and the kids? Or what would happen if God suddenly took those away from you? It would shake your world. What if we have a president that just is so far removed from what we want? Is that going to shake your world? It's one thing to know that we win in the end. But do you realize that you're going to walk through things that are hard now? Don't let the circumstances kind of hijack what you know to be true. That's the last one. It's important for us to understand this book so that we can take the message, make it plain for others. That's what Habakkuk was charged with. You write it and record it plainly. Get it on the tablets because we want people to know what this is all about. So we've got it. It's here. So now, what are we going to do with it? Be prepared to help others whose worldview doesn't know how to process the changes that are here. When you find a weaker brother or sister in Christ that seems to be distracted by circumstances, and you help guide them back, you bring them back to the very things that are in this book. Teach them about Habakkuk's way of going after the understanding here. He brought his questions as much as possible. Help your church to present God as great and good and concerned about all injustices. Why? Because that's who God is. That one line I didn't really talk much about, but those woes. Do you ever wonder why they're in there? Do you think Babylon cared about those woes? Do you think they were ever told about those woes? Maybe. if they heard about him, who would they have heard him from? Perhaps God's people that were being held captive. Those woes were there to encourage the heart of the one that says, you know what, things are gone to pieces here, but I do know what that means. Those are not curses that someone would speak to someone else. Those are a reality check. Alas. How terrible for them. How terrible for you, because something is coming. There is a perspective that those woes that are given there aren't really so you can say, or you guys are going to get beat up. It could be a taunt, but there is this, we want mercy in our lives. Those individuals are victims of the enemy. And realize that we ought to have that same perspective. How terrible for the one who rejects God. I too found myself drinking from this book, and I hope you will too. It is, there's more there than I could have unpacked. But I trust that you would be motivated to read, learn the message, and enjoy that time in the Word. Our Father in heaven, we are so grateful that you have given us a record of what was to happen, and before too much time passed, Jerusalem was overrun. The choicest of the young men were pulled away from their families. Others were enslaved, taken captive to a land and customs. There was no more temple worship. There were no more feast days that they could celebrate nationally. It looked like an awful period of time. And yet you were always in control of everything. I pray that as we study your word, we would understand that our confidence is not in our country. We love our Constitution, but Lord, you might take that away from us at some point. And it's not what we would ever choose. But I pray that we would never doubt that you're on the throne and that you care. And in your wrath, we know you will remember mercy. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.